Well, hello everyone. I am Janelle Smith. I'm currently in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the US, and I am an artist who started this year training as a death doula. I did the Going with Grace training, as well as a couple other things. I've been a part of the local death cafe for a little while, sporadically for a few years. It's, I take time off and come back in every so often, but mainly what I do is I'm an artist, and I've been that way for my entire life. I act like it's a disease or something, but it's I've been an artist for my entire life, and I am an animator and an illustrator, and I kind of dabble in a lot of other things. So really, I'm just going to talk about what I do and how I got here, and I am doing this in hopes that there are other people out there like myself who enjoy the combination of the arts and death work, and just trying to, I don't know, find some way to merge the two, and to talk about grief and death and loss through the arts. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. And can everyone see the screen that I'm sharing? Is that, yes? Hopefully. So let's see. Let's do. So this is just about visual storytelling for grief and loss, and how I kind of go about doing that. The image on the right is a GIF that I made from a painting that I had done a few years back, and it was kind of my first foray recently into finding ways of adding movement to still imagery, which is something that I work with a lot. Just in general with animation, but trying a different version of it. Also, I apologize for two things. One, my laptop sometimes gets a little bit loud, and hopefully you don't hear that. And also, I have a cat running around. She is currently upstairs, but sometimes she likes to interrupt. And so I apologize if she jumps up here and starts, trying to give her 2 cents, because she does not understand otherwise. So the GIF is something that I had created from just a painting that I really enjoyed that I made from watercolor and India ink. And then on the bottom there, I have my contact information. That's my email, my main website, jazzmated.com, just because I also go by the nickname Jazz Malone. It's a very long and uninteresting story, so I won't go into that. But jazzmated at Gmail. And then on Instagram, that's my tag there. And then Dear Jborn is the tag that I use specifically for the death doula work, as I'm getting further into that. So first, why bother to honor memories that aren't yours? Why do humans feel this need to have collective grief? And I'm not going to talk about scientifically why this is happening. It's just more of a personal reasons why. But for me, getting out of my own head is important when it comes to grieving, when it comes to loss. I am in my mid-30s, and I've been to about 20 funerals, the first one when I was 4 years old. And it was my grandfather on my mother's side, who's pictured here. It's me on the bottom right. But my grandfather was very sick, and he was old. He was 89, so he was on the older side. And his body just wasn't doing so well, so he was on his way out of this world. But my family has always been pretty comfortable with introducing the children to the idea of illness and dying from a young age. This is what happens when you get older. Your body starts to not be as virile as it was when it was younger. So he was my first funeral, and I was 4 years old. And I remember because my father brought a little step stool up to the casket so that my brother and I could climb up and poke the body. He could tell us, this is not your grandfather as you knew him. This is the body, and it's just a body. It's nothing to be afraid of, and it's okay. I think that kind of just directed the rest of my life into thinking about death and the differences between what happens when we're alive and what happens when we're dead. Another reason that I got into this work is I found that there is great comfort in collective grieving and collective grief, and being able to be with even strangers and say, I feel a loss. You too have felt loss, maybe not this one, but it's really nice to be able to connect with someone that way. And then sometimes it's just easier to imagine, a hopeful memory. If you can have some kind of joy in grief for someone who was not as close to you. It can be really difficult when you're right in it, when you've just experienced a loss, to think about joy and happiness and hope. But when you're working with or around someone else that you don't know, it can help to imagine hope and joy for that person. And in turn, that helps to open, at least me, it helps to open me up to thinking, well, if they can have joy, and if there's happiness present, even in grief, for this person, then, the same can be said for myself and for my own grief. So that's kind of why I started thinking about memories that aren't mine. Because again, like I said, I've been to so many funerals, and they've all been very different, and they've all been very fascinating. And I'm very interested in how people choose to honor their dead and memorialize their past. But for me, I wanted to learn how to memorialize people that I didn't have a specific idea about in my own brain. So there's that. And then going back to the second point, collective grief isn't new, right? It's something that we've done, that humans have done for a very long time, for forever, basically, is collectively grieving. These two images are from last summer, here in the United States, and specifically in Philadelphia for the middle. It's, people grieving George Floyd, people grieving death by police brutality, people grieving just the state of affairs, being in a pandemic, feeling scared and hopeless and alone, and trying to take down these old monuments that are seen as kind of the cause of the grief. But these other 2 points that I have here, on the bottom left, this is a memorial that I went to earlier this summer, completely outdoors. He was a local artist named Juan Carlito, and he traveled around the city, rather. He did these oil paintings. He was kind of known for waking up earlier than dawn and walking the streets of Philadelphia and, finding other artist friends and crashing on our couches, or just waking us up in the early morning and saying, hey, let's go for a walk and let's walk to another city. And he just made all of these acrylic paintings, oil paintings, watercolor, whatever he could get his hands on, he just worked with. And so he would just paint and paint and paint. And so when he died, he died of he got a staph infection, and because he was mildly sick, ended up going to the hospital. But when he died and we had his memorial, the people who put it on asked to bring his work out to this park and just kind of leave it around there. They got a permit to do it. And so we ended up with this large kind of foresty area filled with his work. And it was this really beautiful process of a collective of grieving, of working together and saying, hey, I also was touched by this person. I also really felt that, he left a mark on my life, and I'm going to bring that mark here and show everyone and just be with everyone in this process. This white bike here is something that happens around when a bicyclist dies, either is killed or severely injured by a vehicle. And these are ghost bikes. And so when you see one, they're left around at the spot where someone was injured. So it's just another point of that. If I can nerd out for just a minute, up here at the top, this is from Star Trek: The Next Generation, but I love the Klingon death ritual that's present in that show. When a Klingon dies, the others, at least one, holds their eyes open and looks into their eyes at the moment of death and then screams. And they all just scream out into the universe. And it's really wonderful and awesome. And I think that is just so cool. There's also these, I wanted to add these as well, murals that pop up around town. So I originally grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and I moved to Philadelphia. And in both cities, these types of memorials are very, very present everywhere. Murals and the t-shirts. You have, when someone dies, t-shirts are made, with imagery of them, with their birth date and their death date, in memory of, in loving memory of. And it's a way for people to continue to memorialize that person long after they've died. Murals go up. There's this one on the bottom right here from South Philadelphia that was recently redone, but it just listed names of youths who had been killed by gun violence. And so their names just went up large on the side of a building. You have roadside memorials, you have the Harlem Book of the Dead. And so collective grieving is just something that everyone kind of does. It's something that is present everywhere, even if it's not as out and loud, even if it's subtle, there is a way to collectively grieve. And so I wanted to bring that into my own work, and think about how I can memorialize people that I have never met, that I don't know. And part of that is that, through pictures, and part of that is through painting, part of that is through journaling. And like I said at the beginning, I'm hoping as well through talking about this here and doing this presentation, that maybe I will also meet some people who do the same thing, or are interested in similar things, are interested in working with the arts with death. And so I'm going to show you quickly where I am now and then how I got there. So this is a still image that I found at a thrift store. It just says February 1952. It's just someone standing on the side of the road. I don't know who this person is. I don't know how they got there. I don't know if they're still alive or not. But I found the image very striking. And so I ended up doing this project here on the left quickly. It was just adding a bit more movement to it, having snow falling, having somebody walking across the bottom, having their shadows going past, and just trying to bring life back into this picture. Just to say, I don't know who this person is, but I recognize that they lived, and I want to kind of bring that memory back into where they used to be. Maybe it was a good moment for them, maybe it wasn't so great, but I want to imagine them as, being happy in this moment, and maybe not alive now, but having lived at some point. So the process that I worked through is kind of long. It took kind of a winding road to get to where I am now. I experienced that first funeral at 4, and I kept going to different ones afterward. And the one that hit me the most was right after college, and it was my best friend. Her name is Helen. And she died very slowly over about 1.5 years. She had breast cancer, and then it spread to her liver and her lungs and her bones. And I wasn't doing very well mentally at the time. This was, like 15 or so years ago. I was getting into college and just not doing great. So I started journaling. And I started painting. And especially when Helen got sick, I started doing more with that and just creating just every day these little journals, little sketches. You know, she went to surgery this morning and she came out okay, and just what she looked like when she was out of surgery, and just like random notes about my day and about my life. And it was just this way that I could grieve what was happening and process what was happening for myself. This is a painting that I made around the same time. This is 2011, and just trying to help myself to process what was happening with my friend, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. You know, when something hits you hard, we all process it in very different ways. And I was trying to do it in a healthy manner, even though I didn't quite know what that meant at the time. So I was doing all of these journals. This is on the left here. That's the entry that I made right after about a day after she died. I got the call at about 7:30 in the morning, and I don't think that I actually wrote that much that day. I kind of wrote this little blurb and then left it, and then continued to try and think about what was going on afterward. And it was very difficult. It was a very difficult time. And I kind of picked up journaling later. So I still have these big journals, these, you know, endless, you know, sketches and writing, and all these little paintings that I made around the time as a way to try and process what was going on. Another thing that I noted, that I reread recently, because I hadn't looked at this in quite some time, was that right after, a friend of mine had called and said, "Hey, so Helen died this morning. We're all gathering at my house and we're going to make origami." And there were about 15 of us. There were friends, there were fellow students, some of her teachers came, and we sat there and we folded all of these paper cranes, just to have at her memorial. And it was a really beautiful collective grieving ritual that we did for each other, just sitting there and, you know, this kind of Zen thing of folding paper and over and over and over again together as a group. On the right is a painting that I did a couple of years after that, about 2 years after that, and that is when my father passed. And that, you know, he had a very difficult time with his death as well. He was sick, and then he was better, and then he was sick again. And so I ended up not journaling and not painting for quite some time. And when I finally came out of that, this is the thing that I painted. It's pretty big, so I don't have it with me. My mother has it now, but it's, I think it's 16 by 24, something like that. But this is just kind of what came out when that happened. And this scribbling is just really nice. And I think maybe because I studied animation, doing something very meticulous is very soothing to me, just doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And you end up in this very calm state of mind. It's a bit like yoga. So that's the imagery that I made after that. So I was working with still images. My training was in animation. I hadn't yet started death doula training. And I still wanted to think about grief and grieving and how I was processing that and how other people were processing that as well. And so I kind of took this next step from illustration into working with comics, and just trying to storytell for how I was feeling at the moment. And I ended up with this series. There's 4 altogether. And so this is the second one. This is a part of the second one and a part of the third, but just trying to explain what was going on. And so this was when I was, you know, working in a hotel restaurant, and we were washing dishes, and I was trying to explain to myself why it was so uncomfortable to grieve publicly. And, ooh, pardon me. And so I was, you know, standing around, and the strangers come up and say, "Hey," it's, you know, they see my face and they say, "Hey, it'll get better." And they give you a hug without even asking. They just kind of come up and they just assume you want a hug from me. And they just hug you out of nowhere. Or standing at the bus stop and, this woman saying, oh, it helps to smile when you feel down. And people thinking that, oh, you just need to smile. You just need to be happier. And then, things will get better. Just be happy. As if that's just the easiest thing in the world when you're processing a loss. And again, with the hugging. But the thing that helped me the most, and what I ended up putting here, is a coworker saw me just being upset. And he knew that I was grieving. He knew that I was trying to just keep coming to work and, just focus on that. And he told me, and I wrote here, when this happened to me, no one would leave me alone. Every day it was, do you feel any better? Don't worry, it'll get better. I know they were trying to help, but all I wanted was space and for someone to acknowledge that it was a crappy situation. This sucks. And that helped me so much more than anyone coming up and just hugging me or just telling me to smile, telling me to just be better. And I wanted to turn that into something visual for other people to see and to maybe relate to. Because I know that people process grieving and loss differently, but for me, this is how I processed it. And I wanted to know if anyone else did as well. And it turned out when I put it out there that, yeah, a lot of people did feel that way, that, yeah, I just want someone to tell me that, yes, this sucks, to acknowledge that this is a crappy situation. This is something that was done on the right here a couple of years after, and it's just very short. It just says, it was 3 years ago today. I thought I'd feel worse. And that was, again, me just trying to understand what was going on in my own brain. When I started putting these comics out into the world, I quickly realized that there was a collective thing happening. This wasn't just me in grief. This wasn't just me in loss. This is other people relating to someone else's loss and grief. Even if it wasn't about death, it could have been grieving, a way of life, or, not being around someone anymore, or anything really. But putting it out there helped me see that collective grief is really important. This was a kind of the last segment in that whole grieving comics series that I made. And it was much longer, so I don't have the whole thing here. It's very, very long. But that was a story I wanted to tell people about what happened when I thought I was over grieving and I thought I was completely through a loss. And it turns out that I wasn't. I was living my life. I was going about my day, and I found a hurt bird on the sidewalk, and for some reason I just broke down, and I could not get over this bird. And so I ended up making this entire comic story about it, just to, again, say, like, hey, who's thought they've been through a loss, who out here has thought they've been through grieving. And it turns out that there's still a little bit of something in there that just jumps out at you when you least expect it, and you think that you're just having a great day and something immediately brings you down. Well, because of the whole collective nature of this, I started asking other people about their grieving and what their process was and how they felt after they lost someone. And so on the right, this is an illustration that I made after I talked to a friend of mine that I've had since kindergarten. His father died, and I wanted just to know, is this similar? Is this different? How did you feel? What did you do? And he told me, what he did afterward. He told me how he felt, and we kind of worked together to create this illustration here on the side, just about him running off, from Detroit. So we live in the Midwest, and so there's city and there's also woods. And so when he learned of his father's death, he kind of just drove out a little bit and then just ran off into the woods and screamed and broke down in the woods where he could just yell into the void. It's very similar to the Klingon death ritual, which I found amazing. But it was this great back and forth between the two of us of how do you grieve and how do I grieve and how can we put that together? And so it turns out that this is, again, nothing new when it comes to collective grief, and when it comes to comics in particular. There's a long history of people learning to grieve through comics. This one, Day Tripper, is my absolute favorite. I read it before my dad died and again right after, and I'd have to say it's probably the graphic novel that's helped me the most with all of it. But it's by Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba. They're a twin duo from Brazil, and actually I have it right here. But in the book, it follows this guy who is just traveling, and so every chapter he dies at a different point in his life, and he doesn't know that this is happening, but he makes a different choice in every chapter, and because of the choices that he makes, he either lives a little bit longer, he lives a little bit shorter, and either way he's going to die at the end, but it doesn't really matter. It's just, about the choices that you make during your life, as opposed to waiting for your death. Just how do you live your life, and how does that affect how you feel when you get to the point when you die? The Best We Could Do by Tibui is stunning. That is a woman trying to understand why her parents are the way that they are, and she's really grieving the life that she felt that she should have had or could have had if her parents were more open, if they were less judgmental, if her father especially wasn't so harsh all the time. And she kind of comes to this resolution of, okay, so I did not have the life that I did not have the childhood that I wanted, and this is my way of grieving that. But they also did not have the life that they wanted, and they are in grief. And so now I know how to recognize what's happening with my own parents, because we're going through the same thing together. And it was just this really beautiful exploration of approaching someone who is close to you with love and with openness, even if you're both going through something that's a huge struggle. Mouse, Persepolis Bayou, Chicken with Plums. There's quite a few graphic novels and comics that are about grieving, that are about collective grief, that are about personal grief, understanding loss and understanding the world around you in a way where you feel kind of sad, but you also try to find a way forward. And so it's not something that is new to the world. It was new to me when I started to do this, but I found very quickly that it was this really wonderful tradition that I was ended up joining into. And I started doing workshops as well around the city of Philadelphia, working mainly with youth, some adults, but mainly with youth, and just getting them to journal their day through comics, journal their feelings through comics, understand that if they're angry, if they're sad, if they're happy, if they're tired, if they're, whatever, that's okay, and that we can process those things just by putting them down on paper or, in this case, iPad or whatever else. You get things anywhere from, 4 panels of, I woke up this morning, I went to school, I came home and did my homework, and I'm at my workshop. You can get anything simple from that, or you can get something, like I woke up this morning late and I missed my bus to school, and my mother is angry at me, and now I'm also angry, and now I'm sad. And getting people at different ages to sit with their feelings, understand the cause and effect, and just let them kind of flow through them, and then process what to do next. Because if you are angry and you don't know why you're angry, you don't know why you're upset, you don't know why you're grieving, it can be very difficult to figure out that next step. And so doing the workshops really was a blessing for me, I think, is being able to see other people working through these same things and learning how to explore this with other people, and especially with kids, because they're so fascinating and they just absorb so many things about the world. And so they have a lot of feelings, and it's nice to see them figure out how to process those feelings a little bit better. So kind of the next step between, so I did the still imagery, and then I ended up expanding that into comics for storytelling. And then I got back into animation. So I went to school for animation. I love animation and I teach it currently. But at the time, I wasn't actually doing anything. I wasn't doing any of it. And, you know, there were a lot of reasons. You know, I didn't feel like I was quite good enough, or I didn't feel like I quite had a vision of what I wanted to do. But through hobbies, I actually found that I could get back into it. So one of my hobbies, and I understand how odd this is, but that's okay, is I collect old photographs that I find on the street or in thrift stores or, you know, in people's estates or whatever. And I just keep them in this collection. And I ended up with this kind of big collection, and this isn't even, you know, half of it, but I ended up with this big collection of photographs of people that I don't know. I have no idea who any of these people are. I don't know how they got there. I don't know why their photos were thrown away or given to the thrift store, what have you. But I started collecting them, and at first they just made me kind of sad of, you know, somebody had this entire life, and before digital cameras, people were very specific about what they took pictures of. They wanted to remember that moment. They wanted to remember that person or that place or that thing. And then it was all just kind of tossed away. And it could be that, you know, they were digitized and so they didn't need the hard copies anymore. But I ended up with this large collection of photographs. And looking at them, I just thought, I wonder what this was like when the person who took the photo was looking at it. And what did it feel like? Was there snow? Was there rain? Was there, you know, what kind of light was there? Like anything at all. I found this picture of this boat, and this is the first one that I did. This picture of this boat, and so I tried to make it move, and I have it kind of just floating across the screen and move the clouds a little bit, and it's extremely subtle. I you know, it's a very small picture, but just having this thing floating, it made me feel like, okay, I understand what the picture taker was doing. They were standing on this bow, and they were looking out into the ocean, and they saw this beautiful little boat, and they decided to take a picture of it. And I kept going from there because, well, I just had this, I have this entire collection of photos. And so remembering people that I don't know and memorializing things that I'd never experienced has been this really calming exercise for me. This is this kid with all of these bicycles. I don't know why he has so many bicycles. I assume they belong to friends or, you know, his teammates, because it looks like he's on a sports team of some sort. But just having these things move, having the spokes move, having the helmet fall over, I thought it was just a really fun way to look at that. Somebody took that picture and said, you know what, this is fantastic. You look great there. You have all these bikes around you. And it was a living moment, and I wanted to bring that back. So I've continued to do this. This is a couple, I think from about the mid to late 70s. And they were in this kind of industrial space with all these birds flying around. So I had the birds move. I added a little bit of smoke to the front, and I just gave them this moment of being back, taking the photograph again. I don't know what else went on in their lives, but just being back and taking the photograph. The same with this guy here, if it will let me. Maybe not, but having his beer refilled so that he actually has, there it is, so that he actually has something to drink, because it looks like he's about halfway through his beer, and I thought, yeah, let me refill that for you. Somebody took a photo of this guy while he was walking towards them, and I don't know, maybe it was a family event or something, but now he gets to have his beer refilled for a little while. All of these are just found objects for me, and they're found memories, and it's kind of like trying to figure out where they were, what they were doing. Someone took a photo of their kid and they dressed them all up and gave them this like really nice little soft background for them. They're wearing a cute little hanbok, and yeah, maybe thinking about what it was like for the parents or the guardians or whoever watching this. This one's a weird one because I was looking at their faces and they all seemed quite interchangeable. So I made them interchangeable because it also seems like a bit of a strange photo. Maybe it was a wedding or something. They're out in the middle of the woods. But in this case, I was thinking about trying to remember people that you didn't spend the rest of your life with. You think back to a party you went to or an event, and at the time you were like, yes, I know this person's name and this person's name, and I'm going to remember them forever. But the thing about memories is, they fade so quickly, and before you even realize it, you don't remember that person's name, and you barely remember their face, and you don't remember quite what their nose looked like or what they sounded like or any of that. And so I ended up making, and it's a little bit of a creepy vibe at the end of it, but I ended up making their faces just completely interchangeable in that way of, these are people I don't recognize. These are people that I don't know. They could be anyone, but they were someone at the time. And again, I don't know if any of these people are still alive. I don't know if they died, how they died, when they died, any of this. But I kind of want to figure it out for myself, hopefully. And hopefully, someone doesn't see one of those and go, oh my gosh, you've ruined this memory for me. I really hope that's not the case. I feel kind of sad that these pictures were thrown out. When I was first trying to figure out what to do with them, I stuck them in a faux scrapbook situation. So I was like, I'm going to scrapbook this. I think everybody has that year where they get super into scrapbooking. And I was like, I'm just going to put like, this was a great party or whatever. And it felt a bit forced. It felt like too much of a joke, I guess. And I wanted to feel more of just a lost memory, just like a quick little moment that there's no context for, but it just kind of exists in this moment in time. So I had a bunch of these. And again, I've got, beyond this giant binder of images, I've got an entire drawer full of them as well, just from all over, a lot of different people from a lot of different ages and places. A friend of mine was flipping through the binder once, and they pointed out to me, hey, this is the same couple, but older. And I started looking through, and I realized that after collecting these for a couple of years, I had somehow, and this is probably because I was collecting most of them in the same city in Philadelphia, but I had somehow gotten the same couple over about 40 years of their life. So I have them when they're, just married and it's earlier in their life. And then I see like their kids growing up in the pictures. I see them older, and it's so strange. It's a bit like, it feels almost uncomfortable. Like it feels like a picture of Dorian Gray situation. Like I have their lives trapped in this binder, but it also kind of feels like I'm keeping them a bit safe. You know, this is their life, and it seems like they had a really nice one together. It seems like their kids grew up and left the nest, and they had grandkids, and they seemed happy. The last photos I have of them, they're a lot older. They seem like they're in their 70s, and so I'm guessing that they're not still alive. But I'm just happy that I found them. The question in the chat, where did the photos come from? I find them. So whenever I'm in a thrift store, whenever I don't pass estate sales very often, but sometimes there's, you know, people's estates. Sometimes people just throw them out. I've seen, you know, boxes of photos in the garbage before, and I've like snuck over and, you know, been just like a little street raccoon and grabbed them and like ran away with them and added them to my collection. Sometimes they just kind of, I see things on the street. People write notes and journals and all that kind of thing, and they just like leave them out on the street. And so I snatch those up too. I found an entire journal of someone before, and actually I'm going to go grab that one. Just one moment. But yeah, I found this entire journal just lying on the street, and I thought, okay, well, somebody's obviously missing this. And there was a phone number and a name in the front. So I called and no one picked up. I texted and I said, hey, I found your journal, and I took a photo of it and I sent it to them. And they said, where did you find it? And I told them where, and they go, that's great. And then they never asked for it back. So I just have this journal from 2010. But it's in the collection now, and I'm not sure what to do with that one yet. But yeah, I have these pictures, and you know, I feel a bit like a hoarder because I have like a drawer full and a binder full and another binder and another drawer and like piles of these things. And I've always taken a lot of photos myself. At least, you know, back when we had the disposable cameras and you know, those, and I still have those. But for some reason, it feels weird to me or uncomfortable somehow to reanimate pictures of people that I actually know. I can get more into it. Like I feel more joyful about it if it's someone where I can imagine that they had a great life. And I think it's just because when it's someone that you know, if it's someone in your own family, you think, I already know how this turned out. But if it's someone else, you can give them a great memory. You know, even if they never experienced it, you can give them kind of a joyful moment. So earlier this year, I kind of took the plunge and decided, like, okay, well, I'm into death and memory and all of that stuff. So I might as well at least try to do the death doula thing. I didn't realize that it even existed up until a couple of years ago. And I thought, wow, that seems cool. And moving on from that, off to another funeral. And I have a great uncle he's my absolute favorite uncle in the world. He just turned 82 years old. And back home in Detroit, he mainly works with funerals. He's I guess you would call him a celebrant, but he doesn't really go by that title. He is just a community member who speaks at funerals and helps to honor people's lives and as best as he can. And so I was talking to him about it, and he said, yeah, absolutely, go for it. It's great. And so I was searching around, and I found the Going with Grace training, so I took that. And I am currently considering or studying for the proficiency exam from NIDA, just because, you know, I know it's not necessary, but I would like to at least try, you know, and I'm reading up on all these things. But in the meantime, you know, I'm doing this thing with photographs, and so I've been doing this training, and so the next image is more sensitive, I suppose. It contains a photo of an actual dead person. So, you know, just cautioning for that. So this is me here on the left, and that was when I was trying to figure out what I was doing with death and death doula training. And a friend of mine said that she'd be fine with being shrouded, so I can practice my shrouding skills. And that was extremely fun. I didn't realize that it would be, but just being able to kind of tuck someone in. And she said, "Oh, it's actually very comfortable. It feels like being swaddled like a baby," you know, and learning how to tie someone's thumbs and ankles so that they don't move, but, you know, not tying them too tightly, and just tucking someone in and wrapping them up is a really beautiful experience. And I felt like, you know, it was a good friend bonding moment of being there and shrouding someone after they died. And it was really nice. And I thought, well, I kind of want to keep doing stuff like this. So the title says obits and the perks of being a goth teen in Detroit, because when I was growing up in Detroit, I was goth for exactly one semester, 7th grade. And that consisted of me trying to wear all black and, you know, tying my hair back really tightly and wearing a bunch of necklaces. And it didn't really work out. But it turns out that goth is not on the outside. Goth is on the inside. Goth is who you are inside your heart. And I worked at 2 jobs during high school, and one of them was at the local print shop. And since it's Detroit, unfortunately, they have a very high crime rate there. And so a lot of the work that I did consisted of obituaries, just putting out obituaries. There were club flyers, and there were obituaries, and I did a ton of those. And I hadn't done them in a very long time. But, you know, again, with the death doula training, I was thinking, well, maybe I could get back into this a little bit. And my stepfather's brother passed, and I got a very odd request that now I want more of. But they said, you know, I didn't realize that he even had a brother, but apparently he was injured in a hit and run when he was 19 years old. And he had been injured so badly that he was a ward of the state for about, I don't know, decades and decades. So he died at 60, 65. And so they said, well, this man has never had a life outside of this hospital. He's never gotten up or walked around or any of that. He had those 19 years, and then he just was basically in a coma since then. And they wanted to show him as if he actually had lived past that 19 years. And so my stepdad said, well, the family really wants a picture of him with his eyes open. And so the only image that they had of him with his eyes open was much earlier, and it was a very small, old, blurry photo. So they asked me to take that and try and put it together, and I did the best job that I could. I always look at things and think, okay, I could have done better. I could have fixed this and done something different. But I really loved that request, and I want more of that. I want more of giving people this feeling as if, you know, maybe there's a memory that was captured that can be recaptured and reanimated somehow. So it was really great. So that's where I am now, continuing this death doula work, death doula training, talking to everyone who will listen to me about death, doing these photo reanimations and adjusting pictures for obituaries and shrouding my friends. And now I'm kind of going back and forth between all of these things. And so this was the image at the top. It's another version of it, but it's this painting that I had made a long time ago. I was just kind of sitting on my wall. And so I got back into it and started, you know, figuring out how to animate the parts of it and what I needed to do to kind of piece it apart and put it back together again. In the middle is a comic that I'm currently trying to get out. And it's I guess about how I feel going into other people's spaces or other people's heads or whatever, and trying to be with that. It's possibly the worst moment of their lives, just like this really big moment. Maybe not worst, but just a big moment. And so it's about someone who gets trapped in a stranger's house during a blizzard where they can't get out for several days, but that person's entire family has gathered to kind of witness their last moments, and then have their funeral, have their wake, and then hopefully their funeral once the blizzard subsides. So you have this stranger that's kind of like trapped with all of these feelings inside of a house that they can't leave for several days, and also dealing with the death of a stranger. And so I'm trying to put it together in a way that works, and I guarantee you it will take a very long time. So I'm just letting it come as it does. On the right there, that is a zine that I made mid-2020, when all of this was happening in the States with George Floyd and the protests and the riots and the large collective grief that was happening here. And it was a short zine of 8 pages that was just about what it might be like to live in an alternate universe where things are just okay, like everything's just fine. And I ended up letting people buy copies of the zine for $5 and then donating all the proceeds to, there was a local collective here in Philadelphia, because we have a very large population of people that are experiencing homelessness, especially after the pandemic, people getting booted out of their houses and their apartments. And so there was a collective that was helping with, fixing up homes and getting supplies and housing to people who really needed it. So I took donation, I guess, like payment for the zine, that would be directed as a collective to that place. So that's what I ended up doing. Anyway, that's where I am now. Working on this comic, finding more pictures to work with, finding paintings to work with, finding journals, finding all kinds of just things to reanimate and bring back to life, and trying to figure out how all that fits into what I want for my own life, because I'm sure, as you all can attest, if you've ever been around or worked with or anything to do with death, you start to think about how you're living your life and what you actually want that to look like, how you want that to feel. You start thinking, like, if this was my last day, do I want to spend my last day doing this? Maybe not, Maybe I want to go outside and, stare at the sky for a while, or, get my work done that needs to get done for the future, and read a book and not stress as much, or try not to, because sometimes it's inevitable. Yes. So I think I have still some time left, but if you want to send me photos, if you want to send me pictures of public memorials, because I love those and I would love to look at them and post them and animate things and all kinds of things. But here's my email. It's jazzimated@gmail.com, because that nickname Jazz Malone just follows me everywhere, and I don't hate it. I love it. On Instagram, for comics, I have Jazzimated, but for the Death Doula stuff, for the reanimation of photos, all that's under Dear J. Bourne. And that's kind of just a play on, again, growing up in the Midwest, there's a town called Dearborn that was near where I lived. It's a really lovely little town. And when I think of murals and when I think of, death ritual and memorial, I think a lot of that area, because there's so many, there's just so many memorials that are up, street memorials and T-shirts that go up, and people just painting pictures of their loved ones on walls when they die with their birth and death dates. Sometimes they're mandated by the city, at least in the city of Philadelphia, they get mandated by the city, or, you can join a collective to do that. But there's also just paintings that people do because they need a way to express grief and express loss. And it's a way to collectively say, someone lost someone, and we are going to honor that. We are going to look at this mural on this wall, or wear these shirts around, or, sometimes see decals on the back of cars and trucks, in loving memory of whoever. And I always, smile a little bit when I see those, because I think, okay, somebody sat down and just wanted to say that, this person was a part of my life. So if you want to send me photos to Reanimate, if you want to send me any public memorials, if you do anything similar to this, I would love to meet you, talk to you. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really grateful to know that this whole festival exists. It's pretty great. If anybody has any questions, comments, anything, let me know. Thank you very much for coming. This is awesome. I'm glad there's so many people that are interested in death and dying and everything that surrounds that. There's a note from, Izumi Inoue. I'm sorry I tried to pronounce that correctly. I apologize if I did not do that well. But yeah, old black and white photos of grandparents. I have so many of those, and I just sit and stare at them and think, like, okay, well, is their facial expression in this photo, does it have to do with how they were actually feeling, or is it just because people didn't smile in photos as much back then? Or, I wonder what the actual color of his suit was. He's standing there, he's got like a shirt in a field. I have this old photo of one of my grandfathers with a guitar, and it's this great old picture. He's just got like, that old-timey hat, that hat that all grandfathers wear, and he's just got his guitar there, and he just looks like he's just hanging out. And I really want to know what kind of day that was. Who took that picture? Why did they have a camera at the time? Because cameras weren't regular. And, what was he doing for the rest of that day? You know what I mean? Oh, Angelica Gomez, thank you. And I would absolutely love to help memorialize some family members. I think that that's great. Yeah. If you have any to send, let me know. And every time I see another public memorial, I try to snap a little picture of it. It doesn't always come out that great, but it's nice to know that I'm not alone here with being interested in this sort of thing, and wondering what people were like, and what their lives might have been like, and what they might have been doing on the day that the picture was taken. I'm still kind of jumping back and forth between concepts, illustration and comics and animation, and trying not to bring death up around my students a lot, because I want to talk about it all the time, but doing my best to not do that, and not being like the weird, super dark and gothy animation teacher that's just constantly talking about death in college, because they're under enough stress right now. But it's nice to know that I can come to a place like this and talk about death. So if there aren't any other questions or comments, I'm actually going to just cut it early, and go check out some other sessions that are in play, and see what other people are doing with death and dying around the world. So I think it's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for experiencing this with me, and listening to me ramble on. Thank you so much. Have a good one.